Good morning and welcome back to Terrace Talk. Norwich City are back after a predictably long and boring international break. They face QPR at Carrow Road this weekend, and I'm delighted to be joined by Duncan from the W12 Podcast to discuss that game. First of all, thank you for coming on, Duncan. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Yeah, a bit bored of the international football as always. Thankful we don't have to wait till March now, don't we, for the next lot.
I think that's my favourite time about this time of year is now I get to just sit back and not have to watch too much more boring England qualification football for a few months at least. But we'll start with QPR sort of more generally. Obviously, people will look at the table and 23rd doesn't look amazing. What is the mood like around Loftus Road at the moment?
So the mood is slowly lifting. Obviously, we've replaced Gareth Ainsworth not long before the international break with Martí Cifuentes. He's had 2 games in charge, had 2 draws. The footballs look better, which is a big plus for us. So I think slowly, surely the fan base is kind of getting optimism back. I was at the Bristol City game before the international break, and it was a good full house near enough. The crowd were in good voice. Just unfortunate to just get a bit of a dull 0-0 draw, really. But apart from that, optimism is getting back to where it should be.
Yeah, if you go back to the start of the season, I did have a little listen to your guys' podcast, and just from speaking to sort of QPR fans and seeing some stuff as well, it feels like maybe although Gareth Ainsworth has been at the club before as a player, I've probably heard a few people saying that was probably more the reason why he ended up with that job than sort of his managerial credentials. And I don't think you guys were really fans of him come the end, were you?
Right, I mean, out of the podcast, you've picked me, and I'm the person who was the most anti-Ainsworth of all of us. Yeah, there's no disputing as a player for us, he was brilliant, but his managerial style and his record, even like he's only been at Wycombe. I know he got promoted with them, but never really tore up anything. Yeah, it was dull, kind of basic football, and it was just, not good to watch.
Yeah, you sort of mentioned that style of play, and I think Norwich fans will definitely be able to relate to that with some of the managers. I think it's probably more of a thing at clubs. Certain fans expect at certain clubs that there will be a good style of play, and obviously QPR is one of those. I think Norwich is one of those. Part of that for me, if you look at the transfer business QPR did in the summer, it feels very much like a championship way of playing and a championship way of looking at things. How did you feel about that business? Because obviously they went out and got the likes of Jack Colback and a lot of more experienced players who maybe don't have the legs that they used to. Were you pleased with that at all, or did that feel a bit too championship for you?
I think the thing we lacked last season especially was experience. So getting Jack Colback, Steve Cook in was massive, like to help the younger squad. But at the same time, we were so restricted in the summer with FFP. We've not spent any money at all, apart from on Taylor Richards, which was already agreed from last summer.
Yeah.
So financially, our hands are tied, so it was all freeze. So the business we did was as good as it could have been, I guess, under the circumstances. But we're desperate for a striker.
Yeah. I think you could tell that a little bit from the League Cup game earlier on in the season that there wasn't as much as Lyndon Dykes has obviously been a good player at times for QPR. I think maybe a little bit inconsistent. It did feel like there's not much depth in that department for QPR. But who are the players that Norwich fans should be looking out for at Carrow Road this weekend? Now that things have improved, who are the players that have been key in that?
So hoping that obviously with an international break, Martí Cifuentes has had a little arm around the shoulder of Chrissy Willock, and hopefully we're going to get the old Chris Willock back, because on his day he's up there as one of the best kind of playmakers in this league. Also got Ilias Chair again on his day. I think a lot of teams will fear him, but it's getting that consistency from those two. Dykes again is one of those where it needs to turn for him soon. He's not been on a hit run for a while now. He needs to start scoring. We've got a young lad, Sinclair Armstrong, up top, who terrorises defences with his pace, but it's a lot of that. It's just raw pace. He's not quite article yet. So they're our key men. We're missing Paul Smith through suspension for the game. He was another one of our kind of tricky, quick wingers, so he could be a miss for us. But I think Willock and Chair are our danger men.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the new manager obviously came in only a couple of weeks ago, so not too much of a sample size to look at. When he came in through the door, what did you think? Because obviously there were some links to Neil Warnock, and I think that's probably quite a controversial divider. And given the position you were in the league, maybe some would have been expecting a little bit more experience at this sort of level. Was that the sort of thing you were wanting, or was Cifuentes quite a sort of refreshing approach for you to see?
Well, if you listen to the board, they said that he was on our shortlist back last summer when we appointed McBeal. He's been kind of one they've been watching for a while. So it's kind of not come completely out of the blue. But where the position we're in, it's a gamble. Like Neil, comes in, he knows the league, he'll get you some points. Obviously, Marty's never managed in England, doesn't know the league as well. So it's a gamble, but I'm hoping it pays off.
Yeah, and he's obviously come in and will want to change things. You mentioned the much more sort of positive or at least entertaining style of football. What should Norwich fans expect to see from a QPR team that arrives at Carrow Road on Saturday?
So obviously it is only a small sample size with literally 2 games, but we've had a lot more of the ball and we've been playing the ball out from the back and we've been trying to play some football. So hopefully you'll see 2 teams trying to play some good football.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And having seen them for most of this season, I'm sure you're pretty well placed to tell us about weaknesses as well, given how some of the form has been at times. I'm sure there are probably a few areas you would highlight, but if you're an opposition manager looking at this QPR team, what sort of areas would you target?
Again, it comes down to personnel really for me. If we can field our strongest 11, we've only got a couple of players that are injured, so it's not too many. But if Ozzy KK starts at right back, a lot of the fan base aren't his biggest fan and someone who has got a mistake in him. So if he does start at right back, whoever you've got at left wing will cause us all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I think Johnny Rowe is probably one of the more feared wingers in the Championship, so that could definitely be an
7 goals this season.
Yeah, I think 8. Yeah, actually scored against QPR, didn't he, earlier in the season in that Carabao Cup game. So, yeah, if he's back fit, which is admittedly touch and go at the moment, but if he is, then that looks like that might be quite a dangerous area. I just wanted to come on to Norwich and ask you a little bit about how you view them, because it's always interesting, as reporters on the club and as the fans will be as well. I'm sure you find this with QPR as well. We're all sort of in the bubbles of our own team, and it's always interesting to get this perspective from outside. I think this more comes from managers and other fans, really, but there's these cliches about Norwich being a big side at this level, and I feel like that's probably what gets said about most Championship clubs. But as an opposition fan who's now looking ahead to a game against Norwich, how do you view them? Is there any sort of fear, or does it just feel like another Championship team?
Normally, obviously, when you're like a bit of a yo-yo club, you're up and down. Would normally fear you, but you haven't seemed to be clicking this season as much as you have previous times. So, obviously, we still fear you because we fear everybody at the minute. But yeah, I don't think you have that same kind of impact this time round. No offense. In previous years, I think you've lost a few players, and yeah, I feel like you're almost in that kind of rebuilding cycle at the minute.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. I don't think any Norwich fans would be especially offended by that, to be honest. You look at the league table and that's how it feels. So based on that, obviously you've now got 2 draws in a row, but you need probably still some points to try and get yourselves out of that relegation battle. Is this a game that most QPR fans will be going into thinking this is actually a real opportunity to go and get 3 points against one of the teams that's struggling?
I wouldn't say optimistic to get 3 points or anything like that. But I feel like it's a game where away from home we seem to be better. Obviously, our home form is documented is terrible. We've got 1 win in the past kind of calendar year at home. So to play your guys away, it always feels like fans with a bit more optimism that we could pick up a result.
Yeah. And how do you look at it? How do you see it unfolding this weekend?
I think it's going to be tight. I think that if it goes either way, I think it's going to be a 1 goal in it. I can see it being a 2-1 Norwich, but I'm hoping.
That's right. I appreciate a fairly pessimistic man. I'm one of those myself, and I usually get criticised for the sort of negative score predictions. But I think probably both of these teams, fans, the way that things are going, would be quite surprised if their team actually ends up getting a result out of it. So if it is another dull 0-0, I think that would make quite a lot of sense. Thank you again for joining me. If we've got any QPR fans on here that want to access your podcast, how can they find that?
So we're on all the kind of main media streaming services. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, just type in W12 Podcast and you'll find us.
Brilliant. Thanks very much again for your time. Thanks for joining me and Duncan on Terrace Talk. Go to pinkun.com/subscribe for an introductory offer of $1.99 for your first 2 months. We'll have every kit covered from Carrow Road, of course, and we'll see you there. Again, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.